Good afternoon, everyone. This is Saurabh Singh. I'm the moderator of the event for today. Welcome all ISACA members for taking out time and joining our event. So this is our first event actually happening after the new board has been formed, and I'm welcoming you all from behalf of all the board members, our president. This is a post-pandemic era, and I hope all of you and your family members are healthy and fine. We'll start in 2 minutes. Let's wait for others to join and join the knowledge sharing session with us. So, Vineet, if you want to talk about the priorities of the new board, this will be good.
Absolutely, absolutely. So first of all, I would like to welcome all the members who are there on this webinar. Thank you so much for joining in. It's a great privilege for the entire board members to serve you for the next 2 years of the term. And we want to seek a lot of advice, feedback, inputs for which we want to improve the set of services that have been can be provided to you over the period of next 2 years. So as part of the first reform steps, what we are doing is we are going to send out some survey forms to see how better we can improve the services, and we want to seek your feedback and advice. So that's the first thing that we are aiming to get started with. There will be a lot of new things which we are planning to do over the period of next 3 to 6 months, which you will continue to hear from us, which is in terms of adding certain institution to the board who can help us in terms of adding more knowledge sharing sessions with new age technologies which have been there. So we'll try to introduce and bring some new institution who can help us in terms of imparting and knowledge sharing for the members. That's the first piece that we are looking at doing. We are looking at structuring the courses. So there are a lot of new fundamental training programs which have now been put in by ISACA headquarters. So which are in the primarily in the IT space and the new age technologies. So as part of the reform steps, we would also look forward of bringing those new training programs for you over the period of next 2 years, so that you are able to better equip yourself on some of these new age technologies. So these are certain steps that we are looking, and obviously we would also like you to come forward, help us in terms of volunteering on some of the new pieces that we are planning to do. We are looking at uh, making it a more holistic structure within the board, where we are planning to get new volunteers on board them who can help us in managing some of the activities which have been currently performed by the board members, and who the certain members can help us in performing those activities even more better. So that are primarily the 3 or 4 pieces that we are planning to do. We also plan to do some new programs, which is going to be an annual program, some kind of a quarterly program. That is what our thought process is. And over a period of next 3 to 6 months, you'll continue to hear something on that front also. So I think these are primarily the objective with which the new board have come forward. I think everybody in the board is pretty enthusiastic right now in terms of serving the members, and we look forward to your continued support. Thank you.
Any great energy I'm seeing with the new board and the members also. It was as per the last uh, regional body meeting which happened. And for the volunteership, we need, if you want to, for the benefit of the members who have joined, how they can opt for this. They need to send some emails, contact someone, or what is the option?
So, Saurabh, I think we are still in the process of identifying areas where we can invite volunteers. I think one area which primarily is quite visible to us is helping us in terms of organizing these CP events. Saurabh have come forward from the board, and he has uh, been going to be the primary member who will be driving all of these CP events on the ground for us. But I think he might not be able to give that much time at all point of time, and we would request members to come forward, volunteer themselves who can coordinate, help us to find the speakers, who will help us to organize these webinars so that we are able to deliver it more effectively. Our thought process over a period of next 1 year is that every fortnight, which is after every 15 days, we would like to have at least one CP so that the members are able to gain more and more knowledge. I think primarily the R in the previous board, our focus was to get at least one CP event at least in 1 month. Going forward, our thought process as of now is to get at least two CPE event every month. So that's where we are looking, and obviously to deliver this, we would require certain volunteers who can continuously help us in servicing the members.
Yeah, Vinny, great. Thanks for the information. And some events will be virtual, some events will be in person, which will be for a longer duration so that people can come, join, interact, and share the knowledge. Great. So I'm starting with the today's CP event. This is, as you are able to see the screen, this is on data protection aspects, how we can protect the data. Before starting the knowledge sharing session, I want to share the rules for the session and CP events. So one CP will be credited to participants who have logged in for more than 50 minutes. Questions can be asked through typing in the Q&A box. Presentation deck will be posted on Isaka New Delhi chapter portal. You can refer that later also. And recorded video will be published on Isaka New Delhi YouTube channel. There is a link, you can refer that. And there's a feedback form after the session, you will receive it. And it will be good for us if you will provide the feedback. Accordingly, we will try to arrange upcoming sessions and improvise the sessions as per your needs. If you have any query, any complaint, any suggestion, any thoughts, you can write to info@isakanewdelhi.org, and there's a WhatsApp number. So what I believe is effective communication is key to success. So anyone of Isaka membership family can opt for seeking information or want to give some suggestions. These are the options. Let me talk about Kunal Piyush, who is our speaker today. Kunal Piyush has some certifications like CSSP, CSM, and has approximately 14 years of experience into data protection and information security domain. He's currently working with Boston Consulting Group, and we would like to understand how we can protect our data, which is a key aspect with respect to regulatory authorities or information security aspects, as we all are protecting the information. So, Kunal, over to you. Please let us know what you think about protecting the data, how we can do that. What are the key methodologies you do see, which is important for all of us to follow?
Yeah. Thanks, Saurabh. Are you all able to hear me?
Yeah, Kunal, very much. Thanks for joining Kunal today, the station, and taking time out for sharing the knowledge. Thanks for this piece, and I'm welcoming you from all Saka family.
Yeah, thanks once again, Saurabh. And before I begin on this very important topic, I wanted to first thank not only Saurabh and Vineet, but the entire Isaka board that has embraced this vision for continuous knowledge sharing. I think I, as a community member myself, feel very empowered that we will be a part of such sessions in the future. And I'm proud that I am presenting the first session after the board. So once again, a big thanks to all of you. Now, before we begin, I wanted to just, as sort of mentioned, the data protection is becoming very, very critical. And one of the key reasons is that, it's regulatory environment, ransomware, and everything that is changing. So how, if leaders are asking this question, how we can further strengthen our posture, how we can how we can further secure our data. So that's where I would be speaking. Please let me know if you're able to see my screen. uh, you know Okay. Please let me know if you're able to see my screen, everybody.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, Kunal, we are able to see.
Awesome. So, if you've already guessed now, I think I'm going to talk about encryption as a way of achieving data protection. Uh, as leaders, you would have seen multiple ways, but I want to focus this session on use cases with encryption. What are the challenges? What is multi-cloud BYOK? What are the concepts of crypto agility? How do we secure the key? And then some actual implementations that you can take away right now to your folks back in IT to help secure data not only in motion, rest, but also in use. Uh, so here I begin. I think the first question is always that we ask: why is data protection critical? Why is that's making leaders think about data protection? So of course, one of the first reasons has been ransomware. We've seen recently that ransomware not only encrypts the data and makes it inaccessible for the users, but it also has developed a new technique to exfiltrate out before it starts to encrypt. So it's critical that we are able to prevent not only the data expel but also prevent ransomware from accessing that data. Privacy regulation, I think, as Saurabh also mentioned, very very important. Both GDPR and California Privacy Act mention encryption and mention data protection as are the basis of data protection, in fact. And of course, competitive advantage. So many organizations have intellectual property, have data that can, if compromised or if fallen into the wrong hands, maybe a competitor, it can jeopardize their competitiveness and maybe make them lose business. So that is something that is very critical. So as I mentioned earlier, uh, data protection is something that needs a full three-tier approach in terms of technical controls, administrative controls, and physical controls. We are going to focus on encryption, but uh, please be aware that it needs a combination of all controls. You can have the best technical controls, but if your physical security is not good, somebody can just come into your data center and steal your server's hardware. So make sure we have all of them together working to protect data. Now, the question that everybody is probably asking: what is encryption and why is it so important for data protection? And this is what I hope to answer from the next few slides. So encryption is nothing but something that will make the data unreadable to parties who don't have the key. So all those who don't have that access to the key are called unauthorized parties. It converts a plain text, which is a human readable uh, document or a text, and into something that's called ciphertext. uh, it has been used since ages. So, if you've been a fan of history, you would have seen there was something called a Caesar cipher, or maybe if you've seen this movie called Imitation Game, you would have seen Enigma that was used in World War II. Uh, that was used by the Germans to protect their communications, and to the more recent algorithms that we've seen in use today, AES and RSA. It has been instrumental in protecting data at in all states. So something that's very critical. And then again, talking about regulations, GDPR Article 32 actually mentions that having encryption is considered to be a reasonable level of security. And in case you do suffer a breach, we have to assume a breach mindset, and your data is exfiltrated, but that data was encrypted. You do not require to communicate to data subjects. So think about this for a moment, that you're saving yourself from not only regulatory compliance but also from brand damage. You don't have to go to your end users and and then communicate that your data was stolen. So that in itself makes this very very important, like hand in glove when it comes to data protection. So for those who notice, I mentioned about the key. When the key is not available to unauthorized parties, they will not be able to read the data. And there is a principle of cryptography that says, an encryption, that everything in a cryptographic system can be public knowledge except the key. So people should be aware of what algorithms are, such as AES. They should be aware how it's implemented. But the key that is securing, that is converting the data into ciphertext, that's the thing that you should always protect. So key this key is itself the center of security for encryption, and we'll talk about it of how key secures in the next couple slides. So like I said, securing the key is very critical, and it starts with choosing the key, which means that it should be the correct key size. So, for example, AES is available at from 128-bit to 256-bit. Choosing the right key is important for leaders to make sure that the risk and the reward is matched, and they're able to choose the right level of key size and the right bit. You should be rotating it. There is again no one good answer. For some organizations, you might be rotating it every 6 months. For some, it might be once a month. Again, depends on what you're protecting and how much are you willing to how much effort you're willing to put into it. And then of course choosing the right key management strategy, and of course storing it securely. So we have two terms here, BYOK and HYOK. um, Bring your own key and hold your own key. And there are different encryption types. Asymmetric requires a public private key pair. Symmetric is just one key which will both decrypt and encrypt the data. So ultimately you have to protect one key in both scenarios.
So, Kunal, these are interesting terms. Can you elaborate more about it? Um,
Yeah. So I think BYOK or HYOK you meant. So definitely, I think I do have a slide for that. And uh, so before I begin, these are not like standard and patterns, but what we've seen is something that helps differentiate. So when you say HYOK, which is hold your own key, it basically means the key is held with you, maybe in an on-prem HSM or anywhere that is separate from the provider that's hosting the data. So we've seen keys that are right now stored in your HSM, and the data is encrypted at your HSM, and it's never known to the cloud provider. So it's pretty secure, and its best use cases, when you're using highly regulated workloads such as finance or healthcare, that's when it comes up. So it might also become a little expensive. It might need applications that would support this pattern. And then the bring your own key, which we've seen in many other patterns today, where you could generate the key yourself, and then you provide the cloud provider your key. So you have control over creating it, rotating it, you manage all that stuff. But again, the key is still with the cloud provider. Um, though though all these bigger cloud providers have that trust and all those certifications, but you never know if somebody can just compromise your key and look at the data without letting you know. So that's why hold your key is considered to be a more secure pattern. But uh, bring your own key has a lot of support with many CSP. So you talk about Google, or you talk about Microsoft Information Protection, Purview. They all allow you to bring your own key. So again, a risk assessment needs to be done on what pattern works for you best. So in an earlier slide, we were talking about key security and how rotation is critical. So one of the biggest use cases for rotation is that it prevents exhaustion or prevents overuse. So like a lot of you might recall that if a key is used multiple times, there is a possibility that it can be reverse engineered. A cryptanalysis attack can be done based on how the key was performing, what all patterns it is that it's generating, especially when it is deterministic encryption. Deterministic is that the same text will always have the same cipher text. So it is important that we make sure that we are only using the key for a limited time. So even the NIST standard 838D mentions that the key lifecycle should be based on the number of messages it encrypted. And again, the next is the blast radius. I think blast radius is a key component of everything from network segmentation to key security. If one of your key version does get compromised, it can only be used to decrypt only a subset of data. So maybe you rotated the key a month back, and an older key was compromised. So that key probably can be used to decrypt only 1 month of data. That's also prevents a liability significantly. And again, regulatory, this is a topic again very critical. So if you are a payment organization, you would recognize that PCI DSS articles 3.6.4 and 3.6.5 require regular rotation of key and allow for easy revocation. So if you don't rotate your key ever and you have to revocate it, it will be very difficult for you. as an end user to understand what the impact would be. So if you are rotating it more frequently, you have those playbooks created, and you can better plan in case there's an incident. So now we've talked about key security, but I think a lot of our organizations are today going to a multi-cloud environment. So the question is, how do we manage bring your own key, hold your own key, choose the right size, make sure all our policies and give that assurance are safe in a multi-cloud environment? So the
Kunal, so I was about to ask you, like, okay, we're talking about all these encryption technologies, and in today's world, we are rapidly moving on the cloud. So I believe we should go a little slow with respect to, the methods we're going to talk about, so that if any questions will come, I will attend those for you.
Yeah, sure, I can go a little slow. Sorry, I thought we were going like on time. So yeah, I can go a little slow, no worries. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so how do we protect our keys and manage them in a multi-cloud environment? um, there's a concept of multi-cloud BYOK, and there are certain tools that I've mentioned, such as HashiCorp Vault and Trust Key Control and Thales, that can help you achieve it. Um, Again, I'm not endorsing any of the tools, but I just want to mention that these are tools that help you provide a single pane of glass across different cloud providers. They will help you audit all the key operations that are happening, and most organizations are very hybrid. You may have some on-prem or you may have some cloud. These can help you manage, and biggest benefit I can talk about is crypto agility. It provides crypto agility to an organization. So before we discuss more about what crypto agility is, I wanted to just give you a small diagram, a small conceptual diagram of how this looks like. So think about a data center where you may have an HSM, you have uh, databases, and you have servers. So a CKMS, which is a central key management server, it can hold the key, or it can help in key generation, and it can interface with different cloud provider vaults. So in Azure we have Key Vault, in AWS we have a key management system, KMS. Same thing for GCP. It can help uh, audit operations on who is accessing the key, uh, what is the lifeline, what is the key size, what are the policies that should be applied. All of it can be managed centrally. So these are some things that I would encourage all leaders to explore. From a remote user perspective, they are just connecting to data, and all the keys are being managed centrally. So I'll move forward and talk about a little bit about crypto agility as what this can bring. So as we've seen in the multi-cloud BYOK, has it has discovered all the keys, and it knows about all the keys. So it knows about their algorithm, it knows about their key size, it knows about when they were last rotated. So this is very critical when we talk about something called as quantum cryptography. So we all understand that in terms of quantum cryptography, there will be different algorithms that might render our current ones invalid, or there is an incident response where we need to where when a system is compromised, we might need to change the keys. So these multi-cloud BYOK systems can help you very quickly rotate the new key or choose a new algorithm for the key, because they all have visibility. Today, most of this thing happens manually when you're getting an alert or when there is a new implementation that needs to be done. But if you have such systems in place, you have, for the risk auditors, a single pane of glass that can tell you what the algorithms are and when they were last rotated, and if they need to be changed because of an incident response, that can be done very quickly. Okay.
Yeah, Kunal, on quantum cryptography, I believe is a term which is still in research, right? So,
Hello, Saurabh?
yeah, you can move on, please.
Yeah, but you rightly said quantum cryptography is a term that is very recent and it's still researched. But again, that's what leaders and I would expect people in your position to do to future-proof your encryption infra. So even if that comes up, you are rest assured that you can simply change algorithms. You can simply swap out keys pretty rapidly when that comes up, when there's a new algorithm, rather than waiting for manual stuff to happen, which might take a lot of time. So that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Correct. So,
So I think we still have 30 minutes left, and I wanted to spend the next 30 minutes on talking about really how encryption can be done, what all techniques are employed for securing data in rest, motion, and in use. So if we ask, what our data usually lies in two major locations. It's on a file disk, a system disk, or it's usually in the databases, and that's where I would focus most. So our first effective technique that I would present is transparent database encryption. So this helps encrypt our database files very, very efficiently and very, very effectively. So the only thing we have to remember here is that transparent database encryption protects only the data at rest. So that means when the data has been stored on a database file and it is placed, that's when it knows that that has been encrypted. So the benefits are abundant. The first big thing is that because the data contents are now encrypted, even the backups that are taken are equally protected, which means that if somebody if somebody copies your database backup file and tries to restore it on a different server, uh, you will not be able to do that. They will not be able to do that because they don't have that encryption key. And this could be a very good use case for organizations where they have sensitive data present and they want to control the restore. So they want to make sure that the data is sanitized before it goes on to UATs. So even an inexperienced DBA will not be able to do that because they will not have the key. So very effective control, and it is transparent. So from an application perspective, you can go ahead and implement on all the databases that support it, and the application or your whatever you have in place that uses data, it will be transparent. It doesn't need any changes it will use the same SQL queries or SQL queries that are written, and it will be able to retrieve the data. And the good thing is it's available with a lot of enterprise database systems. So when I talk about SQL Server, Oracle, or even MySQL, if you like open source, it's available across the board. So a very effective control that we should enable for databases. Again, a risk assessment needs to be done, but something I think there's a lot of benefit and very little risk left after this. So I would want to just explain how this works from a SQL Server perspective, just to make it more clearer. So think about uh, think about a three-tier architecture application where we have a GUI and we have a database. So from an end user perspective, it's just using an application that's connected to a database. Now the database has been enabled for TDE. So that means all the database contents are protected. So usually how it works is that there is a symmetric key that has been employed to encrypt all that data, because symmetric key works best with large volumes of data. And that symmetric key is usually placed within the same database server, and it is generated by that particular database. So it's Azure SQL, SQL Server, or MySQL. But this is something that you can say is a limited pattern. Now we can extend this pattern by using a third-party key store. So think about bring your own key concept that we just spoke. So we can have another key provider such as HashiCorp Vault or Azure Key Vault. What that will help is that will encrypt the database encryption key. So there are two encryptions that are happening. The first is the database encryption key, which is decrypting and encrypting the database. And then there is a key in Azure Key Vault that is encrypting the database encryption key. So thinking about whenever SQL Server would need to decrypt the data, that it would need to decrypt the database encryption key, which will be done via Azure Key Vault, and then the key will always be in memory. The decrypted key will always be in memory. So the benefit is that a simple you're kind of making sure that you have control over the key. You know when it was when how many operations are happening, and even if anybody gets to your server and tries to do lateral movement, they will not be able to get your database key, which from which they will be able to view the data. So a very effective technique to not only protect the key but also protecting the data. uh, and we'll talk about one more pattern here, which can, I mean, instead of Azure Key Vault, we are talking about another pattern with Azure Key Vault, HashiCorp Vault. It is another product that can help you do BYOK. It can help do TDE. And ultimately, if you look at it, the flow remains the same. On the left-hand side, rather than having an Azure Key Vault, we can have HashiCorp Vault. So if you ask me why we have HashiCorp Vault when we can do it Azure, it helps you be more cloud agnostic. So tomorrow, if you had databases within SQL Server in AWS or Azure, you can keep the key at a central place within HashiCorp Vault, and you're not logged in to that provider. So that's where you're becoming more cloud agnostic or platform agnostic. So those are benefits of having a third-party system. But again, this requires a little bit of integration. Uh, but again, you need to assess what the risk is and how much benefit you achieve with that.
Yeah, Kunal. So there is a question in the Q&A box, and I believe it is for TD. And it's what about performance impact on database performance with respect
Hmm.
to their
Yeah.
data encryption methodologies they're using? You want to talk about?
Yes. Thank you. I think it's a good question. And that's what I mentioned. There are minor issues. So yes, you might see slightly low latency, slightly high latency, but with today's systems, which are very very highly GPU and very high IO optimized for databases, it might be negligible. But in case this system is already low, you might also slow down your application a bit, because ultimately there is a key that will be decrypting the data, and that is a compute intensive operation. So you'd have to make sure you have to really evaluate how much it impacts you, uh, and which is why you want to do an assessment on what database is absolutely needed. uh, you know so yes, there may be some impact, and that will depend on uh, what your server configurations are. I hope that answered the question.
So impact will be there, but yes, we need to be compromise the security if we are not doing it. So better choice to have it, but obviously a proper architecture review is supposed to be done and
Yeah.
impact assessment of the encryption methodology we are using. Thanks, Kunal.
Yeah. Thank you. So, continuing our discussion on the same topic in protecting databases, we also have something called as column level encryption. So, in an earlier thing, what we did was we simply encrypted the database at rest with the database files. But what about the fact where we have sensitive columns? When you query those sensitive columns, you could still view them because again, it was transparent. So column level encryption gives you another layer of protection. What it is doing is it's protecting not only the data at rest, but it's protecting the data in use, and it's protecting those individual columns that may have sensitive data like SSN or birth date. You know, so the best thing is that from a from it also helps you prevent against insider risk, because supposingly think of a DBA who may do a select star on the table and read all the data. That's something that you can prevent, because they will not have the key to those columns which are already encrypted. So they may be able to read some part of it which are non-sensitive, but not at all on the sensitive columns. But the downside of this is it will require you to re-engineer the application. It will require you to uh, understand how the key will be generated, stored, and how that key will be used every time when you are trying to read a particular column, because only with that key can you read that sensitive column. So there is out of the box implementation with Azure Always Encrypt, and we will discuss it next. But that's something that will help prevent a lot of breaches and from both insider and external risks. So coming back to the implementation, another conceptual diagram. So always encrypted is a layer that sits between the database and the application. Only the application ideally should have the access to encryption key, through which it will send a special query and it will get unencrypted data. So anything in between that, whoever does not have the encryption key will always see encrypted data. So the data is in use and at rest, it is protected. Okay. Uh, and then I'll just show you how it looks at a database level. So if you looked at this is in the before slide. This is what happened from a SQL Server Management Studio. A query was sent. You could easily see the SSN and birth date. But when we employed encryption on two specific columns, SSN and birth date, we can now see that they are unintelligible and anybody can still read some parts of the query, but not the sensitive parts. And that's what the benefit is. So, you can easily protect with some re-engineering if you can sensitive data at all times. So only right now in this pattern, the application is authorized to read data. Nothing else can read that sensitive data on its own. And you can obviously have auditing on the application to make sure that your sensitive data is in control, as another control.
Well, this looks like to be a very good option to implement with respect to where we have to, you know, adopt a zero trust methodology maybe. However, how feasible it is to use or means what are the options? Is it only in cloud or we have
It works
options?
on many databases. So this is an example of SQL Server, right? But this is a feature that's provided again by many implementations, and you need to review with that technology vendor if column level encryption is available. It might be named differently for different applications also, but from a SQL Server perspective, like I gave an example, Always Encrypt is the name of the technology. It stores the key in Azure Key Vault, or you could store it anywhere. Yeah, it stores it in Azure Key Vault. It doesn't allow any cross vendors, at least SQL, but that is something that I think will change as more and more customers demand more agnostic solutions.
Okay. People can members can post their queries in the Q&A box, and I can produce. Thanks, Kunal. You can please proceed, please.
There's one question. Yeah, Ankit, you can go. Go ahead.
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, there's a question. There was a person who had raised his hand. I have allowed him to speak now. Okay, maybe you can go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So now the next thing we're talking about is disk security, and why it is critical is because we've seen that a lot of companies have issues with with lost laptops, and there's a study that was done back in 2018 or before that calculated that a lost laptop average value is about $50,000. So, and it's not the cost of the hardware if you've all reverse calculated. It's basically the cost of the data that's on it, and it's just an average value. So now the question is, how can we limit ourselves in case there are laptops that may have sensitive data of our clients, which might be maybe $1 million of data? So the answer to that we have is full disk encryption. It is very similar to what we discussed conceptually for transparent database encryption, but again, it helps protect encrypt the entire disk which has data, and ensures it can only be read when when the key is available. So like we had in TDE, even if you were able to steal the laptop and unplug the hard drive and try to put it in another one, you will not be able to restore it. You will not be able to read that disk, because the encrypted disk is actually used it actually the encryption key is actually stored in a TPM, which is tamper protection module. It's installed on your motherboard to protect the disk. So a very effective control. It's available today on BitLocker with Windows, FileVault, Mac OS, even on Linux, and even the cloud. And this is a control that has been used with every cloud provider. Even EC2 provides it. Uh, and it's, I mean, I know there was a question on performance earlier. So even with some performance implications, it has now become negligible because a lot of innovation has gone through it. And something that I would recommend everybody, uh, every laptop, every server ideally should be encrypted again with full disk encryption. That's what it is. And we'll discuss a little more on the diagram. We'll have a couple of diagrams that will help explain how it works a little bit in terms of Azure. So in terms of Azure, for all the technical folks, you would recognize that there is this PowerShell commandlet that can set Azure disk encryption, that can help start encryption process. So how it works at a fundamental level is that you need to have an Azure key vault where the keys would be stored. So these are the BitLocker keys, which are used to encrypt and decrypt the disk at boot. So again, this is Azure specific, but again, as I mentioned, every platform has its own way of managing it. But at the end, it's very similar. There is a disk, there's a key, and there's a key store. And all the encryption and decryption happens by allowing that machine to access that particular key. So at a fundamental level, that's how it looks. And again, huge benefits that what it offers and the protection it provides. Okay. Um, I'll move ahead. And this is how BitLocker looks like on a Windows machine. So maybe go ahead and check this command if you have a Windows laptop. And if you're not seeing anything encrypted, um, definitely that's a sign that you could improve on as a control in your organization. So you can see disks are not encrypted here. And one disk, a data disk, is getting encrypted, and 1% has been encrypted 1%. And those are 2 terabyte disks actually that have been attached to this particular laptop. Right. Okay. So now all along what we've discussed is so far securing data, uh, data in at rest and data in use. But again, data in motion is equally critical. So remember all these technologies that we said. So for example, at least at TDE level, so when the database gets encrypted, the query gets read, the data movement is actually unencrypted. It doesn't check on that. So the data that's flowing through the wire may be unencrypted, and which is why we need to still apply encryption on that data in transit. So one of the techniques that I can share is end-to-end encryption. You might have also heard this when we were talking about WhatsApp specifically. Uh, the biggest benefit is that it can allow users, only the users who are communicating the messages, who are communicating can read the messages. So nobody in the intermediate step can read this data because it is never decrypted. However, the downside is that it will require an application to be set up in a way that can support end-to-end encryption. It might need some redevelopment effort in an existing application, and you will need a certificate authority. The whole concept, I have a diagram I'll explain a little later, but the whole concept is that you are requiring two keys, one key to encrypt, the other key to decrypt, and only two people have that key who could perform that encryption and decryption. Nobody can do that in between. Uh, there is another slight downfall that I would ask you to introspect, is about content inspection. A lot of organizations have started to use SSL, for example, SSL inspection or content inspection to check data loss prevention. And in this pattern, this might become an challenge. So if you are moving certain data that you need to have compliance against to understand what moved, this pattern may not be fully effective. So Be careful, but again, it's a very effective pattern, used by a lot of major, even like many applications such as Zoom. I think WhatsApp uses, a lot of other enterprise applications are using this, and it is considered as to be very effective. So uh, let's just look at how it works at a high level. So let's see, there is a sender Bob, there's a recipient Alice. So what Bob is the sender, and what it does is it encrypts the data with the public key of the recipient. So again, this is using asymmetric encryption. So the public key of Alice or the recipient is known by everybody, and this is where PKI or a certificate authority will come in place, which will help distribute those keys. And then anybody in the server or in the intermediary, because they don't have the private key of Alice or the recipient, they cannot decrypt this data. So only Alice, which will have her private key stored on her own endpoint, or maybe in this case, let's talk about mobile, WhatsApp mobile. Only she can decrypt the data. So this provides a strong guarantee of confidentiality, and something that, in case it demands something, I would say that can be used very effectively by the organizations.
Kunal, I have two queries on the previous topics, but STPM resources are very, do vary based on the encryption used, for example, column level encryption and so on.
Sorry, I missed the question. You said,
Yeah, I believe it's on TPM resources, and I believe it's based on the hardware. They're
yeah,
talking about. Yeah. So
yeah.
if you want to address this, or maybe I mean, this is more on a hardware case. Obviously, it varies. But if you want to talk about TPM resources are very based on the encryption you go for example, column level encryption or any other.
So you're saying that, how the encryption, where is the encryption key stored for column level and all that, or uh, like, or
So
does it
I
need any
believe this is
hardware?
on.
Does it need any
Yeah, yeah,
hardware?
yeah.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
on
Okay,
resources.
okay. So I think, a lot of it, for example, TDE, it can be software. But again, if there's a possibility that you could store the key on your hardware in an HSM, that extends the pattern, like we talked about in this case, we talked about column level here. The encryption key, we've not mentioned the storage. In Azure SQL, it stays with Azure Key Vault right now. I'm sure there are other patterns available with other vendors that may allow you to export the key to an HSM. But at least in Azure SQL, the key is stored within Azure Key Vault. But within that Azure Key Vault, it gives you an option to store in an HSM backed storage, so it gives you a slightly higher guarantee. Uh, but yeah, I mean, that would depend on the implementation. These are all concepts in flexibility. You could even store the key in an HSM using that multi-cloud BYUK, for example, that we talked about, and the key, it can be used to kind of decrypt the data that may be stored on-prem. So that those patterns are also possible, but again, those may be expensive, and you'd have to look if the applications support them.
Yeah, right. And for HSM, there are different uh, parameters set by different authorities to be
Right.
used. Okay. Fine. We can move on.
Yeah, I think, um, that's all I had actually for today. Um, happy to answer any other questions that may be in the chat box. You know,
Sure, Kunal. We have a more query by Ranjana. If full encryption is configured in cloud, then there is no need to sample check the data if it is encrypted or not.
so you should have controls. Because then there's a concept in security: trust but verify. So you are trusting the vendor always, and I think that is something that an auditor, very senior auditor, told me. You are trusting, but definitely, if you have a mechanism where you could verify, maybe do those audits as well, if that required. Absolutely. But yeah, and at a high level, if the implementation is done correctly, with all the keys and BitLocker, even BitLocker, for example, can tell you the compliance ratio of all machines. how much they're encrypted. It can give you a generated report. It can give you like a consolidated report as well.
Yeah, obviously. See, verification should not be left behind.
Yeah.
In the level of controls we do implement in all the aspects. We have one more query, Kunal. Can you explain a bit about the importance of data classification and data protection with respect to encryption? Obviously,
Hmm.
we are talking about today. So classification, how it plays a role. As we have different type of methodologies of encryption.
Hmm.
So if you want to talk about, um,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good question. I think data classification is an administrative control, like I talked about. And one of the best features is it will tell you what is the priority of the data, right? Is the data sensitive, or is it public, or is it just internal use? So you could use a higher level of encryption on data that is sensitive. So for example, uh, some data you could say will always be stored on prem, and it will not, it will be, and the key for that will always be stored in my HSM, because that data is sensitive, right? So that way you can increase the burden of encryption on that type of data. For other data that may be more internal, you could potentially host in the cloud, and use a bring your own key concept there, where the where even though the damage will be limited in case it gets out. So and you could even use different algorithms if need be, like AES 256 for data that's very sensitive, and maybe AES 128 for not so sensitive data. So all these parameters, again, as I talked about, choosing the right key size, the right algorithm, depend on what the sensitivity of data is, and that sensitivity of data is actually determined by data classification. So that's probably one of the important controls to determine what technology you want to apply on that data.
yeah, well said. We have one more query with respect to auditing or verifying some of the encryption patterns could be implemented already. So, will you talk about if there are tools or methodologies how we verify or audit if the encryption is perfect, or if we are going to use multiple kind of encryptions? So, what kind of use cases we have or talk about in the industry? You know,
So you're talking
for
about,
auditing,
so you're
verifying
talking,
or auditing if the encryption is perfect, or if
yeah,
you
yeah.
check something or reporting.
Right. So that's a good question. I think, for example, I'll talk about certificates here. So certificates also use public key encryption, and you can have something called as a certificate lifecycle manager. There are multiple tools. It can tell you what encryption, what algorithm is being used by your certificate. For example, I've seen some even encryption like RC4 being used. So it can tell you, those tools can tell you if you're using the right level, what algorithm are you using, what is the key size, all that can be done. So yeah, and in fact, I think when we're talking about BitLocker, so even individual tools will also have their ways to tell you how it is used. I think I'll paste a document for example, BitLocker. It gives you a command, and it can also tell you what encryption is being used, and you can easily automate it with something called as PowerShell.
Yeah, Kunal, I believe there is a standard audit question happens like which
Yes,
all
yes,
algorithm you are using and if it is standard one or not, secure one or not. So
exactly.
this is something we are all satisfying the audits with respect to that technology. However, yeah, different tools and technologies which we are using, accordingly we are getting the reports from there also if
Yeah.
the encryption is end to end and completely perfectly done or not. Thanks. Let me see if we have another questions.
I will just show the example of that question in a minute on the slide. So let me just share and answer that question, one like fully answer that question correctly. Uh,
Sure.
so I don't know if you're able to see my screen, but this is
Yeah.
just an example of a BitLocker command that is telling me what is the encryption methodology, like AES 128. Has it been fully encrypted or not? And this you can very easily automate using PowerShell, and you can get for all computers, for all drives in a central report. As an auditor, you can ask for that. Your technical teams can easily prepare it, and it will give you that assurance that yes, it has been encrypted. And yeah, so there are so you could do a discovery with certificate, and then there are individual tools. Those will provide you with relevant options to tell you the algorithms and everything. That's possible, and a good question. Yeah, thank you for asking.
Thanks, Kunal, and I believe we are not promoting any brand here. However,
Yes,
BitLocker
yes.
being native tool of Microsoft, so lots of people are moving towards this encryption for the laptops at least. I believe we are reached to the end of the session. Let me see if I can take one more question or not. Some questions are on the cost, but I believe we cannot comment on that. This is something people can talk about.
Yeah, we're on 3. So
I believe Shivakant has a query like we have covered data and rest, data in motion, data in use also we have covered, right? And all if you want to
yeah,
summarize,
we did.
yeah,
Yes,
you want to summarize on that only for a couple of seconds and we can close.
we did data and use. So I think Shivakant, column level encryption, it helps with data and use as well. Yeah.
Perfect. And this session and content will be available on the Saka website and YouTube channel as I have confirmed in the start. And now, Kunal, I would like to thank you to in this session and help share the knowledge about this important piece and methodologies uh, as the best practices are available. Thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Saurabh, for being a wonderful host and presenting this first event. Really appreciate it. And once again, best of luck to the Saka board. Looking forward for more such sessions. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Hi everyone, Rajiv here. If you want any particular topics to be covered in the future CP events, you can send us a mail and we will try and cover those topics.
Thanks, Rajiv. So these are some of the information which I've shared at the start of the session. You can refer it. These all will be available on the website of the chapters page and the content also. I would like to thank everyone who has taken out time and joined us and took benefit of the session and the CP track what we have. Thanks everyone. With your permission, I would like to close the session today. Thanks, Rajiv, for joining us.
Thank you everyone. Bye.
So take care. Bye for now.